Monster House presents.
It's actually quite unlike anything we've ever seen before.
A giant, hairy creature, part ape, part man.
In Loch Ness, a 24-mile-long bottomless lake in the Highlands of Scotland. It's a creature known as the Loch Ness Monster.
Monster Talk.
Welcome to Monster Talk, the science show about monsters. I'm Blake Smith.
And I'm Karen Stolzno.
We're back with part 2 of our interview with Adam Gorightly about Operation Mindfuck. As I put this together, I'm landing a little after a presidential debate in which the GOP candidate claimed that Haitian refugees in Ohio are eating pets. It's a sad indictment of the national media that the majority of that coverage merely says that these claims are unsubstantiated. I'd like to believe that if you're a regular listener to this show, you would immediately recognize this story for what it actually is, a racist bit of urban legend that has been leveled against refugees in America at least since the 1980s, and is probably much older than that. But that word unsubstantiated implies that there's some point where you might be able to track it down to some root incident that would confirm it to be true. But that's not how folklore works. That's not how urban legends work. But watching these stories spread, and there are lots of them, is indicative of a few things. It shows that we still have a portion of our population that cannot abide by the idea that anybody's doing better than they are, and especially if they're not one of us. This is the basis of stories like pets being eaten by immigrants or the infamous black welfare queen that Ronald Reagan conjured up in his presidential run. People who are themselves struggling often are very susceptible to the idea that strangers are somehow gaming the system. Weaponizing envy is child's play for a politician, as is weaponizing the othering of newcomers. Now, this may seem off topic, and I do try to steer away from politics. I have friends and family on every side of the political spectrum, and I recognize that empathy for people who are different from us is not always a universal value. But the rumor side, the conspiracy side of all this, the idea that there are secret forces at play steering us, whether they're the deep state or foreign agents or people of different religious backgrounds or the Masons or the communists or alien species or subterranean reptiles, the list could go on, but sooner or later it usually lands on either the Jews or the Illuminati, and sometimes those are treated interchangeably. Some people get so caught up in trying to ID the root culprit that they never consider that maybe nobody's pulling the strings, that every outcome may have strong forces from various groups, but that the end state is ultimately the result of stochastic forces outside any one group's control. Even a single event can be confused with enough injections of narrative manipulation. As I record this, we're just a few days after the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. What was that about? Do you have a story about it in your head? What did it have to do with the war in Iraq? There are so many conspiracies around that one event that debunking them all or figuring out which are true becomes a monumental and never-ending task. It's easier to train people to spot conspiracy theories by their broad form rather than through the minute refutation or confirmation of the various elements. Immigrants are not eating our pets, but stand by, I'm going to make a prediction. Very soon, I expect someone will find a pet corpse and get it into the news. And this will not be confirmation that the rumors are true, but it will be confirmation that folklore is often made real through a process called ostension. That's just a fancy way of saying that sometimes ideas get into people's heads so firmly that they want to act out the legends or provide pseudo-evidence that the stories are real. Folklorist Bill Ellis wrote about this in his book, Aliens, Ghosts, and Cults, Legends We Live, but so have other folklorists. I've argued myself that the thing that creates a typical monster flip, for example, isn't an outbreak of monsters, but an outbreak of story. And the story we're looking at in this 2-part talk with Adam Gorightly is a network of deliberate injections of anarchic conspiratorial narratives into the post-Vietnam world of the 1970s. Our merry pranksters include the Discordian movement created by Kerry Thornley and Greg Hill, and the Illuminatus trilogy written by Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea. Their decentralized acts of creative anarchy were known as Operation Mindfuck. Here's a recording of Bob Wilson describing what he meant and how that spreads.
Operation Mindfuck is a form of guerrilla ontology. It's a group effort involving many people, and it is an attempt to galvanize the minds of many readers and television viewers and moviegoers to suddenly see the world in a new way. And membership in Operation Mindfuck is not secret. It's just once you understand what Operation Mindfuck is, if you are a writer or a director or otherwise involved in the entertainment, literature, theater game, you just automatically become a member if you're sympathetic to it, and Operation Mindfuck rolls merrily along. And since it is no centralized conspiracy, nobody can ever stop it because there's nobody giving the orders. It's the only purely anarchist movement in the arts today. And it's very easy to recognize the members. You'll find 23s popping up in their works. You'll find references to the oncoming Yin Revolution, the Aquarian conspiracy, space travel, and there's an old Italian proverb: when four sit down to conspire, three of them are fools and the fourth is a government agent. And I believe with modern surveillance techniques, that's more true than ever. And any overt action against the power structure is doomed to failure because of the techniques of control that have been developed. But the anarchistic impulses of art cannot be governed. I think more and more of the culture shapers are becoming part of Operation Mindfuck, and the whole world is having its mind fucked. And I'm very happy that I can play a humble part in this noble endeavor.
Now, how an anti-authoritarian narrative became fodder for neo-fascism is still something I'm trying to get a better understanding of, but that is what happened. There are still people playing in this space, teasing the influence of the Illuminati, using the icons of the Eye of the Pyramid and the Apple of Discordia, and generally having fun. And then there are those who take the algebraic idea that if A equals B and B equals C, then the deep state is really the Illuminati, and they run with that. I think about this stuff a lot, and apparently I could just keep rambling on about all the ways these ideas have amused me and frightened me and made the world a more interesting yet also more dangerous place. But there's no end to it. So let's get back to our interview with author Adam Gorightly. Links to his books on these topics and many others are in our show notes.
Monster Dog.
A couple of years ago, I got into a big reading binge, and I never read like one thing at a time. I tend to hop around. And I was hopping around between Robert Anton Wilson's Cosmic Trigger and Philip K. Dick's Valis. Yeah. And I think I was going through a Gnostic meltdown. These books, I didn't pick them up because they were related, but mean, I swear I was losing my mind with how much overlap there was content-wise between these things. It was freaking me out.
Yeah.
That brings me to the Illuminatus trilogy. So I think that starts in 75. And it's clearly, they're novels. They're supposed to be fictional. But if you can imagine a conspiracy, it's in there and linked together. It's crazy.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. So it gets back to Playboy. So this Operation Mindfuck, this interacting between Wilson and Shea and Kerry Thornley and Greg Hill and about a half dozen other people sending back and forth their latest discoveries about the Illuminati and whatever else they had going on at that time. And then, Wilson plants that letter in Playboy about the Illuminati. And in that role as the editor of the advisory he talked about, and he talks about this in Cosmic Trigger too, I think he kind of pushed some magic button and he started getting inundated with all these wild even more crazy conspiracy theories and stuff that people were sending into the Playboy Advisor, and he would share this with Robert Shea. And at one point, they said, we got to write a novel based on all this craziness about the Illuminati and that included the Discordians in the Illuminatus trilogy.
Yeah.
The Illuminati were the bad guys and the Discordians were the good guys, and pulled in, all these different crazy stories and conspiracy theories, like the John Dillinger was still alive. There was another editor at Playboy who kind of came up with that material and started his own Discordian cabal called the John Dillinger Died for Your Sins Society. So it got pretty involved. The guy's name escapes me right now, but and so all of this fed into Illuminatus, and they were writing this in basically 1967, 68, and the idea was for this huge, sprawling, like 1,000-page novel. They were basing it on, at that time, there was The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich was a book that came out in paperback that was like 1,000 pages, a huge thing. And they were contemplating something that size, and they wrote this crazy thing. I think finished it 68, 69.
Horace Naismith. I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
well, that was his Discordian name, but he had a real name too, and you can find out. I have a web site called The Story of Discordia, where I write about a lot of this stuff too, and his name will come to me when I quit trying to think of it. But
yeah, that's how it is at our age, right?
And so they couldn't get it published initially. It took, it wasn't published until 1975 finally, and at that time, to get it published, some stuff had to be removed, and it was broken into a 3-part trilogy just because, to make it more digestible to the public, I guess. I don't know, but
I mean, they have a combined omnibus, but it's a doorstop. It's a honker. Yeah.
and I should touch on the history of the Illuminati real briefly, if I could, and how that evolved.
Sure.
So, and I'm not an expert in the Illuminati. I just play one on the radio.
Is anyone?
So I might get some dates and facts wrong, but it was basically started in 1776 by this Jesuit scholar, professor of canon law at Ingolstadt University in Bavaria. I think I'm saying Ingolstadt.
That's how they say it in the Hammer films. I'm sure it's right.
Last week they hanged a man at Ingolstadt.
Okay. That was Adam Weishaupt, and he started this. Weishaupt belonged to the Freemasons, which is a secret society, and he started this another secret society, which was like, as Wilson describes it, a secret society within a secret society called the Illuminati. And it was, as I understand, it was just Weishaupt and a few students, faculty members wanted to keep this secret because what they were discussing was they were libertines, basically, and they were interested in basically self-determination, women being free to either, live under a hierarchy of religion or not, and they basically supported things like the suffrage movement and, these type of things that basically were seen as heretical, during that period.
Might come across as anti-monarchy, even.
Anti-monarchy. There you go. And so they kept it on the download for obvious reasons. And it was relatively short-lived, I think, not long after, a few years later, their secret society was discovered, and they were basically Weishaupt was branded as a seditionist, and he got the hell out of Dodge, and that was kind of the hell, fled Bavaria, and that was the end of the Illuminati, sort of. But then it got mythologized over time by conspiracy theorists, maybe religious zealots, religious fanatics, however you want to term them. And over the next 100 years or so, there was different books written that because they started being portrayed as anti-religion, and then it kind of got conflated into their Satanists. There was a book by a lady named Nesta Webster, I think, in the 1800s. In the early 20th century, another book on the Illuminati that was pushing a lot of this stuff by, I think his name was James J. Robinson or John J. Robinson, whatever the case. It started evolving over the time, and also other tropes started entering this too. And by the 60s, it had kind of reemerged with these John Birch Society aligned people. And once again, being conflated, the Illuminati was basically part of the structure of these international bankers behind the scenes, pulling the strings, causing all these wars. And there's some an underlying this is getting tied to anti-Semitism too, and that's what kind of the John Birch Society angle was at that time, for using this as a propaganda tool against, they're saying the communists were basically pushing the civil rights movement and integration, et cetera, et cetera. You can see how politics entered into all this. And that's what Wilson and Thornley and those guys were looking at all this stuff and trying, also putting their own spin on the Illuminati. And I forgot what the heck you're going to get into.
No worries. There's still so many aspects to cover, and you've talked about the 50s and the 60s. Could we get into the 70s, and could you tell us a bit about the Church of the Subgenius, and tell us what that is, and is this part of the counterculture, or is it the convergent evolution?
Oh, it was a huge part of the counterculture, and I'm not, I kind of knew about, Bob Dobbs is the main figure with the Subgenius Society, and they were much similar to the Discordians, but the Discordians were kind of behind the scenes, bubbling up into counterculture. They, though they influenced it quite a bit, basically the Church of the Subgenius was a more overt bunch of pranksters who were involved in different public events and crazy stuff. Okay. And Kerry Thornley actually got involved with the Subgenius movement as well. So I can't tell you too much about the particulars about the Subgenius, but if you people can.
I'll tell you that there's a playful side to this, and maybe a sinister side to this. And I think on the playful side, I first really got immersed in this stuff through Steve Jackson Games, and they had a game called Illuminati New World Order that came in right after I got out of the Navy. So that'd been like 94, 95, right in there. And there had been a board game called Illuminatus or something, or Illuminati. I never really played that one, but the card game, man, I loved it. And it came out with they did a re-release of the Principia Discordia, and it's still one of my favorite games, and I have hundreds and hundreds of the cards, but you can play them, and you're an organization, and I'll talk about this in the intro, but you basically build these networks, and they all work against each other or for each other. But if there's a conspiracy that existed, it shows up on these cards, and that's fun. Yeah. But
I have one right in front of me. I have
Oh, really?
A bunch of bookmarks. I knew I had one in there. I pulled it out. It has Illuminati on one side, New World Order. So you turn it around and, it has gun lobby.
There you
Resistance.
There's like the weird. Let's get the weird get organized, and it's a brilliant game. It's so much fun, but by the time we get to 2016 thereabouts, this stuff is being used by QAnon. There's a dark side to this, and I got approached by QAnon people asking me to sell my cards because they really thought there was something more than just a game there, which is crazy. I held on to them, but my goodness, they were selling on eBay just like single card, not for playing, for something else. I don't really understand it exactly.
It's bizarre.
So with the Illuminati stuff, Wilson and Shea once again helped promote this mythology, even though they weren't necessarily trying to promote it in the direction which it's been used here in recent years. Wittingly or unwittingly, they helped unleash this beast, and by, that once again went on to influence or help create QAnon and these type of things. By really in the 90s, the Illuminati started once again getting ramped up by different conspiracy theories. There was a conspiracy theorist named Fritz Springmeier, who wrote this huge book called The Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And it, connected it once again with the banking families and all these notorious people, the Rothschilds that were behind the scenes, pulling the strings of the New World Order. And it kept evolving into they were practicing mind control and they were Satanists. And this kind of played into a lot of the David Icke stuff, of that period. Bill Cooper.
Oh, yeah.
Probably heard his name.
Oh, my God, book, yes. Yeah.
Book, Behold the Pale Horse, featured in it, all kinds of crazy stuff. But he also republished.
He sure did. Yeah.
The
protocols, right?
The protocols of the learned elders of Zion.
Right there in the middle of it. Yep.
He was always careful. I remember on a radio, he said, people don't. I'm not talking about Jewish people. When it says the Zions, they're actually talking about the Illuminati. But what does that actually mean to a lot of people?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's there's this playful side, and then there's this dark and sinister side, and anti-Semitism always seems to be. I don't know what the deal is exactly, but like it always ends up coming back to the Jews, and it's always happened. I don't know why, but I think there's reasons why it happened. Well, yeah. But of the many reasons, none of them are that the Jews really rule the world. Just to be clear.
That much is true.
It's used as for political propaganda, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And for me, back in certainly the 80s, early 90s, it was all fun and games to me too, just like it was probably during the Illuminatus period. But as Wilson later said, Operation Mind kind of came back and bit them in the ass.
It happens. I mean, I'm a big fan of the idea of memetics and how ideas can spread and transform. And it's the two things. They spread and they transform, and they do it without any control from the people who create those ideas. But case in point, Richard Dawkins comes up with memes as a sort of intellectual way of talking about things that replicate and mutate. But what do we think about with memes now? It's just cat videos and cat photos, it's on the internet. So even the idea of memes themselves have, mutated to the point that it's really hard to recognize them anymore. So, but
I'm okay with cat memes.
Well, yeah, those are fine. But, this is such a big topic. I know, and we're trying to limit our episodes to 45 minutes or so. You've done a yeoman's job of taking us through sort of the highlights of this stuff, but there's so much more to read. Yeah. So where should people go from here? What I guess which of your books would be great to get them introduced into a deep dive in this topics? Where should they go?
Probably The Prankster and the Conspiracy. It's basically a biography of Kerry Thornley, and it talks about, the Discordian days and the Jim Garrison investigation. And so I would start there. And also the book Historia Discordia has a lot of the rare Discordian artifacts in it. And,
excellent.
Shows how and it actually has a reproduction within that book of the first Principia Discordia. So, yeah, I would start there, and I have the website called Historia Discordia.
Nice. We'll link in the show notes, yeah.
Took in there, there was a period where as part of a reading group, there's a website called rawilluminations.com, and they were doing an Illuminati reading group several years back. So I kind of took a deep dive and wrote some extended entries where I really got into the nitty gritty of how some of the different tropes and things and names and events in Illuminatus really came out of the early days of the Discordian society and these different people interacting with each other, which no one would, really know unless they had access to the archives that I got turned on to. So anyway, there's a lot of materials there at that website.
Excellent. Cool.
Great. Well, thank you for recommending those books. And I think, there's just so much to dig into with this. But Adam, we've really enjoyed talking with you about this topic. It's just, you covered so much ground. But we've got one final question that we like to ask all of our guests, and that is, what's your favorite monster?
My favorite monster, I think, is the Cyclops from the Sinbad movie.
Ooh, Harryhausen.
Nice.
Yeah.
Harryhausen, yeah.
Nice.
Very
I
good.
just got back from Dragon Con, and I was talking to my wife. When we were still engaged, we went to a special screening of King Kong.
You're a romantic.
Oh,
yeah, and it was down in the cellar, down at the bottom of one of the hotels. But to our surprise, it was introduced by Ray Harryhausen. He was sitting right behind us, and he hopped up and talked about the movie, and we got to talk to him for a few minutes. It was great. I was so delighted. I got to meet him and Ray Bradbury that year. It was really wonderful. So,
love Ray Bradbury.
It's so good.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it, I just kind of came to mind the way that Cyclops moves is quite similar to King Kong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
kind of similar beasts.
Quite a lot. And I know he was sort of tutored by Willis O'Brien. And it was a joy to meet him and to hear him talk about his craft. And I know everybody loves CGI, but man, there is something so organic about classic stop motion photography. It's just unbeatable. Well, you've really scratched an itch. You've taken one off my bucket list by getting to talk to you in person. I've been following your work for a long time.
Topic.
I really appreciate this. I imagine our listeners will be a little bit confounded and overwhelmed by the scope and sprawl of all this stuff. But my gosh, it's such an interesting thing how all these things were so interconnected and way before the internet. I mean, this stuff still exists. I'll tell you one more thing before we go. Like when my great uncle died. He was more like a grandfather to me because my grandfather passed away before I was born. But my great uncle was kind of a hoarder, and I was going through his basement after he passed, and I found a copy of None Dare Call It Conspiracy, which is that weird Gary Allen book. Yeah,
that's one of the John Birch Society.
It sure is.
Publications.
Well, what was weird about it was it had a letter in it that was basically introducing him to the John Birch Society, and it was co-signed, or like it had all the names of these other people in town that he could like reach out to learn more about it. And it was like every dentist, every doctor, every prominent business person in my hometown. It was it was just like
very elite.
It was extraordinary. It's like by the time I found it, that had been 30 years since it had been sent out. But I mean, these guys were all now the sort of the patriarchs of the town. And it was, and they'd all been like immersed in this John Birch sort of conspiracy minded hyper-conservatism, libertarianism. And it was like, it was so wild to run across that. I've still got it over here on my bookshelf with that letter. I keep thinking so cool. I might turn it over to the Historical Society for the county or something at some point. It's very interesting.
That sounds like it.
Yeah. Well,
very cool.
Thank you so much for your time and for your work, and we really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Monster Talk.
You've been listening to Monster Talk, the science show about monsters. I'm Blake Smith.
And I'm Karen Stolzno.
You just heard part 2 of our 2-part chat with Adam Gorightly about Operation Mindfuck, the Discordians, and the Illuminati. Links to Adam's books are in the show notes. I've definitely had some fun playing around with the ideas in this space, but watching it get weaponized for political purposes has been demoralizing. Of course, that's true for many, many, many other ideas and movements. At least, I had a lot of fun playing the Illuminati New World Order game in the 90s, knowing nobody would ever really believe in a secret orbital laser platform being used by a powerful cabal.
On a now-deleted Facebook post, Green questioned whether California's deadly campfire in 2018 was started by lasers beamed down from outer space. Lasers, she says, somehow connected to the Rothschilds, the Jewish European banking family, the target of some of the oldest, laziest, most dangerous anti-Semitic tropes on the books, Jewish space lasers.
Oh, damn. And that's not just some hypothetical threat. Thanks to redistricting, she now represents the county adjacent to mine and encompasses the city where I was born and a lot of the state where I like to go fishing and visit with family. Her hate-mongering nonsense used to be so absurd that it was literally on playing cards and games, and now I've had to watch it run wild in my community, seriously believed. Well, anything can be weaponized, I guess. I just wish that evidence-based thinking was more valued these days. Will the fun days ever come back? Only when the majority of us have the discernment to recognize hate and nonsense, even when it's being used ostensibly to our own benefit. It turns out that the wobbly legs of conspiracy are often shod in the iron heels of fascism. Around the world, people report monsters, but are they real? Join the detective of the impossible, Joe Nickell, as he walks you through investigations to reveal often surprising natural explanations behind some of the most famous cryptids and legendary animals ever reported. Using scientific skepticism, meticulous fieldwork, and historical deep dives, Joe Nickell seeks out hidden clues and real-world candidates that sometimes reveal that even the most unlikely monster stories may have a basis in reality. The Science of Monsters is the first book from Monster House LLC, the publisher of science shows Monster Talk and In Research Of. The revised edition is now on sale and includes corrections and suggestions from you, our listeners, and now readers. Sales of The Science of Monsters directly benefits Monster House and its podcasts, thanks to the generosity of its author. Pick up the revised Science of Monsters today at Amazon.com, available in paperback and Kindle editions. Monster Talk's theme music is by Peach Stealing Monkeys. If you found this episode interesting or informative, won't you please take a moment and give us a review on your podcasting platform? We'll be happy for any reviews, but our demographics suggest that iTunes reviews have the most impact on raising awareness of our existence to potential listeners. And we thank you for your honest feedback.
This has been a Monster House presentation.